And we should be recording. Okay, so welcome to our Building Your Resume in InDesign workshop. Have you guys used InDesign before? Are you familiar with InDesign? Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, okay. So you probably already know this, but I just want to reinforce one of the reasons why we want to use InDesign as opposed to something like Microsoft Word is it just offers more points of control when we're paginating. So when we're adding large blocks of text, we want our spacing to be appropriate. We're adding graphics, we're doing overlays, we may be adding images. InDesign just offers us full control of all of that. Plus, it gives you a chance to practice those InDesign skills, which is a job skill. So let's go ahead. I will hop in and share my screen, making sure I have that chat up in case there's any questions. So inside InDesign, one of the things that you can do is use Adobe stock templates to help you get started with your resume. So I'm going to walk you through that step first and kind of show you how to break down how to look for those and then how to utilize those templates, and then we'll make our own. So you start with just create new. And then we're going to think of this as a print document. So as soon as I click print in that new document dialog box, I can start looking at templates. And when I find one that I like, I want to, I'm a girl on a budget, so I'm looking for this word here called free. And I can preview it, I can download it, and I have full access to all of those. So it's well worth looking for and looking at all of the resume templates that are available right on board inside of InDesign. And I have already opened one up just to save us some time. And so the first thing I want to show you is kind of all of the things that you have going on here. One of the things that you have going on here is all of these pages. So if we look over here in this area, you can see we have all kinds of different pages available. So if I come down here, I've got all kinds of additional resume styles available. So it's not just the first page you see. Now, if you don't want to utilize these, you can, of course, select them and delete them using that trash can at the bottom of your Pages panel. I also wanted to point out that these use layers panel or layers quite a bit. So make sure you have your layers panel out. And then you can, as you click on things, you can kind of figure out where they are. And they've done a good job of naming those and etc. So it's then a matter of you go in, you type in your information and proceed. So the templates do make things a lot easier. It's already styled, it's ready to go, and you might want to bring in your own creativity. So let's look at how to do that. So I'm going to do File and New. I'm going to start a new document. It's going to be a print document, letter sized. When I make it letter size, it's going to automatically show up as 51 by 66 picas. And I'm not going to add any columns to this. I'm going to show you how you can do that inside of InDesign. I am going to keep my margins and hit OK. So this is that 3 pica margin that I put in here. Something to keep in mind, especially if you are printing from pretty much anywhere unless you're doing specialty printing. Printing things to the edge of the page like this, that's called bleed printing. Most places don't have capability, so you would always get that white margin anyway. So you may not want to design with any margins on your page. It's really up to you if you like that framing or not. I'm going to go ahead and leave those in there because I do kind of like to see that framing. All right. So a little orientation for the InDesign workspace. We have our tool panel over here. Anytime you see a tool with that little white triangle, that means I have hidden tools. So if I want a circle shape. The ellipse, that's underneath that rectangle shape. Just a word on the style of workspace I'm using the essentials. If you ever get kind of panel anarchy, you can reset that and it'll go back to its default position. Over on this right-hand side, I have my properties panel. That's really going to be how I do most of my changes for type, for color, followed by pages. We only set up one page. I have my Creative Cloud libraries. Now, for our purposes, I'm going to bring up a couple of other panels. I'm going to bring that layers panel up, and I'm going to bring up my paragraph styles panel, which we'll use a little bit later. For now, we're just going to grab it and dock it over here with these. Okay. So now we've got all of our panels set up. Notice we can see rulers. And right now these rulers are in picas. If I don't want those in picas, I can just control click on that ruler. And if I want to switch it to inches, I can switch it to inches. And if I'm just learning, that might be an easier way to kind of see things with that inches format. And I mentioned I wasn't going to set up column guides beforehand. I can set those up now, and you do want to have some type of grid layout. So to change my current one, I just go to Layout, Margins and Columns. And let's say I decide, you know what, I don't want these margins around the edge. I can change those, and I can add in columns here. And so that's the preview of what I would be changing. Now I'm going to go ahead and add those back in. And they were 3 picas before, so I'm just going to add 3p, have those the same. And I'm going to add a manual column. So I'm going to hit OK. Oops. There we go. And have it the way it was before. So to add a manual guide, I'm just going to drag a guide. So I'm clicking on my ruler over here. I'm going to drag that over to 3 inches. Now, if we looked at our margins and columns, and let's just preview what 3 columns looks like, you can see that it's almost hitting that exact same spot. So I could still kind of use that as those columns if I wanted to. I'm just preferring this guide for what we're doing today. The other thing that we want to think about is how I'm using all of these grids and guides. So I have Snap to Guides selected. So when I draw a shape, it's going to snap to that guide that I just created. I can also decide to hide any of these guides, and I can use the same keyboard shortcut of Command : to bring that back. I'm going to grab my rectangle tool, and I'm going to draw a rectangle shape. So I'm thinking about is having this area over here be part of my information. I'm going to go to my properties panel, and I'm going to set up a fill. Now I can add colors beyond this space. If I want to add a new color swatch, I can click here, go to new color swatch, and I can navigate to all kinds of different color books and add those. I can also utilize my Creative Cloud libraries. So if I go into my KU visual identity, I have all kinds of KU colors that I might like to use. So I'm going to grab Steam and Fog and Night. I'm just going to control click. I'm going to add those colors to my swatches. I can also, again, click those 3 dots next to my swatches and load swatches. So if I've downloaded other color swatches, I can add those. Definitely try to keep out of using default colors. They just look a little bit basic. So I'm going to add that fog. If I decide I wanted to make a tint of that, I can make a tint of that. A tint is different than opacity. With tint, we're actually adding white to that color. With opacity, we're actually making it sheer. And so that's snapped to those guides. And now if I wanted to start using my layers panel, I can use my layers panel. So I'm going to go ahead and name this my left rectangle and hit OK. And if I want to make sure I don't want to move that, which is a wise idea, I'm just going to lock that whole area. Now I'm ready to create another layer. So I'm going to click that and we're going to call this my experience. Actually, let's call this biography stuff. And notice it's coming in with a red color. I can change those colors. And that just means when I select those, it's going to appear in that color. If I start losing track of my layers, I can always use that visibility button to toggle that. All right, so let's grab my type tool and notice it's coming in red. Type my name, come back over to my properties panel. And type, just like anything else, has a fill and a stroke. And I can sort my type by filtering it. So let's say I want to find a nice serif. It gives me all of those different examples. And I can scroll through and find one that I like. I would encourage you, just kind of like you did before, to get away from the default fonts. So try to avoid those when you're using them. So I like the Garamond, and we'll just bump up our size here. And so here you can see I'm getting that split. So I want to decide, do I like that on 2 lines or do I prefer that on 1 line? And I think it does look better on 1 line. And one of the things you should practice doing is just kind of cleaning up your text boxes. So you can manually do that, or through the object menu, you can do fit frame to content. And that just makes sure your boxes are nice and clean. Now, as far as aligning objects go, I probably want to draw out a new guide as I start adding information below this. So I'm going to add a new guide. And now I can put things like my address and my phone number. Now, really, things like an address are not super necessary. If someone needs that information, that you're going to end up giving that through HR. So I think email and phone is a better recommendation. And again, make that white. And so we have that nice dropout style with that. I'm also thinking of hierarchy when I start adding things in, as well as my alignment. And so I might want to look at how I would make things bold or just do some different text features in here. So let's make our name bold, and that still fits. And notice how just changing it to bold really gives it more presence in that space. Now, if I wanted to even make that larger, I have a couple of other options. So let's make this 30 point. I'm just going to draw that to the next line. Now, I went beyond this text box, and I know that by that red plus. So not only does that red plus tell me, but at the bottom of my screen, do you see how I'm getting that error here? That error is letting me know I have overflow text. So I just need to resolve that. Now, putting these on 2 lines has now allowed me to maybe even go larger with my name. But do you see the space I'm getting between these lines? That's another thing you want to start working with. By default, it's some weird integer. And I think it's always nice to bring that down. And especially in this case, just with this font, I can really decrease that leading. In addition to thinking about how my objects are aligning vertically, I want to think about how they're aligning in relation to each other. So one thing I can do to test that is bring up my document grid, not my baseline grid, my document grid. And basically every square of this is 1 pica. And so I can use what's called hierarchy of space to kind of determine where things go. So now I'm one pica apart. Now it's a little hard sometimes to see these pica grids. So if you ever want to change them, you can go to InDesign Preferences. And when you bring up your grids, you can just click Grids and Back, and that'll bring those grids to the front. Hit OK. And now you can see it would be on top. It's still a little hard. I think my gray color is basically the color of grids. So let's say you want to add a photo. A couple of different ways to add a photo. I can file import, or excuse me, file place. I'm going to grab a photo. And when I place this photo, it's placing full size. And then I want to scale it down. So to scale down a photo, I'm going to Shift and Command until I get it the size I like. I can also decide that I want to use a shape. So let's say I'm going to use a shape, and I want it to be maybe a circle shape up here. So I can grab my frame tool. To draw a perfect circle, I'm going to hold my Shift key down, get that placed in there. And with that selected, I can file place. And then that photo goes in there. Now you really have two parts to this photo. So if I click in the center, I'm grabbing the inside of that photo. And then I can just move wherever I want. Now I want to make sure that I fill that space. If I want to select the circle, I click outside and notice that's that red selection. So I kind of like that, but I want to make sure that this is aligned to this shape. I've got that locked. So I want to unlock that, select both my rectangle and my photo. There we go. And I just want to make sure that those are aligned to the horizontal centers. And so now I have that centered in that column. I could also, if I decide, I want it to be aligned to the left with my name, I can do that. And again, I'm looking at those grids to make sure that those are 1 picas apart. Let's go ahead and talk about adding details. So one of the things you can do is add little small details that can make things interesting. And these aren't necessary, but these are kind of fun little things you can do. So I'm going to make this bottom look like there's a little page turning. So I've just drawn a rectangle, and I'm going to fill that with paper. Now I'm going to grab my pen tool, and I'm going to add a shape. And so my shape, let me get down here, is going to be a triangle. You can see I just filled those, clicked in those 3 corners. And now let's make that, instead of black, we will make it the same fog color. And you can see it looks like we've got a little page turn there. And because we went 1 shade, remember we tinted this color, that's just a little way to add a little bit of interest in there. And that's all part of that rectangle shape. Other things that you can do to add a little bit of visual interest. First, let's look at a print preview. So if I hit W on my keyboard, that's a print preview. And my photo kind of looks like it's floating into outer space. That can be an interesting time for me to add a drop shadow. So I can go up to FX and drop shadow. And notice I have that whole object selected. And just add a nice drop shadow. I'm going to decrease the size of that. And I can change the direction of how I want that to look and the distance of it. And hit OK. And so that just adds a little presence or a little depth to that. And now I'm going to start thinking about And we'll come back to this in a second, but I want to come over here where we're going to have all of our education and experience. So I'm going to add a new layer. And this new layer, we're going to start with education. Well, I've already got this shape that kind of divides these spaces, but if I wanted to divide even further, it might be a good time to bring up my document grid again. And I was doing 1 pica of spacing between these objects. I might want to do 2 picas of spacing here. And I might want to consider adding a little bit of a line. So I'm going to grab my line tool. If I want to make sure my line is straight, I just hold my shift key as I draw. And notice I'm not going all the way. That's going from the top of the page to the bottom of the page. That's an interesting way to just add visual interest. And I can make that the same color as before. And I'm going to change that to, let's do 0.75. So I can type in values. So let's see what that looks like. And so let's make that the tint, because I did not make that the tint. There we go. Just adds a little bit of extra division in there. And I'm going to put this back up, and I'm actually going to move this over 1 pica. And I'm going to start my text box along this pica. So I'm in that education. I'm going to grab my text box, and I'm going to draw a full text box. And we're going to do a little compare contrast on how you can style text. So the first thing I want to show you is if you have a resume from Microsoft Word, you can try to import that and see how that would start with all of that content. You can, of course, copy and paste it as well. So I'm just with that cursor hopping there. I'm going to go File, Place, and I've got a Word resume here, and I want to click Show Import Options. So I click Open. It's going to give me some options for how I want to bring this in. And one of the things I'm doing is removing styles and formatting. You can experiment, like if you want to preserve those. Most of the time they come over pretty wacky. Hit OK. You can see this already did a good job of bringing in some content. So I can, at this point, come in and start styling. I'm just going to add some space in here so we can get this in. So let's first look at how we want to start our education. And I'm going to select that. Let's style all of this with that Adobe Garamond. One recommendation I have is if you are a little concerned about choosing different fonts or making sure that they match, use the same font and just use bold and italics in different sizes throughout that document. Okay, so as far as size goes, I think you are fine with doing 10 point on body copy. I would not go to 12 point. 12 point is actually incredibly large. It doesn't always look like that. Like if we compare this 12 point to this 10 point, this 10 point looks really small. But when we actually get it printed, it's going to look a lot different. But what I wanted to show you is weird spacing that is happening. And let's hide our document grid for a hot second. So as we've styled these different sizes, each of these are reading different leading or line spacing over here. And that's why it looks kind of wacky. So you have a choice here. You can come in and decide that, well, for this one, I think I'm going to need like 30 point leading. And then for this one, I think I'm going to need maybe 24 point, and go through and use your leading to get appropriate spacing. That's completely fine. You can also decide to have them in separate text boxes. And that's typically what I do. I'm going to pull this off to the side. Different sizes of text in my mind should get different text boxes. So I'm going to draw my headline text. That's going to be education. And it's really a matter of how do you prefer to do your spacing? I prefer to do my spacing using my document grid rather than using my leading. I save my leading for when I actually have lines that I need to appropriately space out. And because cases like this, where I really want this to be like maybe a half a pica between these two objects, I can just grab this, use my arrow, get that right where I want that. Then this text, which looks really spread out because Adobe Garamond naturally has a lot of leading, you can see how when we have it separate, it looks a lot better. So the other thing I wanted to mention, when you have maybe longer bits of text that might be more descriptive, you might run into hyphenation like we did here with coursework. Under my paragraph styles, I can just unclick hyphenate and fix that. And I would recommend taking off hyphenation to make life a lot easier for you. Now, we would have other areas. So we would go through experience and these awards and things. I wanted to show you how you can use paragraph styles to kind of clean this up and make it super easy. So we've got paragraph styles right here. These are also right here in your properties panel. So it's kind of the same thing. So I'm going to select that education, and I'm going to come over here to my text style under paragraph styles. I'm going to click new paragraph style, and I'm going to call this my heading. And then I'm going to go to my degree, same thing, new, and I'm going to call this subhead. And then my next one, select it, and we're going to call this body. And the reason why I do that is because it's going to make styling your text so much easier. Let's go ahead and copy our next grouping down here. All right, so this should be in my body copy style. So I'm just going to drop down body copy. This is going to be in my subhead style, subhead. Headline. And you can see how quick it is. I don't have to worry like, did I use 30 point? Did I use 20 point? Makes it so much easier. And then you can see this one, we didn't really pay attention to our leading, and I'm not liking that. So I can change that up here or inside that paragraph style. So I'm going to just double click subhead. It's going to come up. Here is my basic format, and I'm just going to switch that leading to 14 and hit OK. And there it is, and it'll be fixed going forward. So anytime we decide to make a change, using paragraph styles makes it so much easier. Let's say that we decide, you know, I actually want my headlines to be the same color we used over here. I can double click heading. Go down to character color. Pick that steam. Excuse me, we used fog. And hit OK. And it changes all of it. Except for this one that should be in body style. There we go. So that is using paragraph styling and how you can change that. That's going to make life so much easier. Another styling I wanted to show you is how you can use bullet points. So let's say instead of doing body copy here, you wanted to list out job skills that you had. Remember, this is the time that you want to use your verbs. So I developed social campaigns, ran events, other stuff. So those, to use bullets, I drop down to bullets and numbering. I can click those bullets. And if I decide, you know what, that circle isn't what I want, I can go into options and add other bullet characters. So the best way to find those is to look for like one of the web dings or zap dingbats. And this shape is interesting to me because it kind of looks like that shape. So let's try that. Let's add that. And we'll add that one too and hit OK. So you can see we've got those two new bullets. If we select that one, hit OK, now we have new bullets. So you can personalize those to make those unique. Now notice our body copy has a little plus mark. It's saying, hey, this was body copy, but you made it something else. Are you sure? Well, I can add a new style. So this new style can be my bullet style. And then I'll hit OK. And so now if I add other text, and we'll just do some fill with placeholder text. There's my bullet style. So the other thing stylistically that you often see is like a rating system. So there's a couple of different ways you can do that. One of which could be using some ellipse. So I'm just going to use my shift key to draw a perfect circle. And with that perfect circle, let's do a fill. And then I'm going to alt drag. Distribute that spacing, make sure, I'm pretty sure they're aligned to the tops. And then for this one, I just want a stroke, so I can use that flip, fill, and stroke. And so that can be a nice rating system. You can also use a rectangle tool and use a bar ranking system. So same kind of idea. So that, or you could have that look. So that gives you an idea of how you could do some ranking systems as well. So let's look at some options for sharing. Most common would be your PDF. And so if I'm doing a PDF, I always go to my high quality print. That just guarantees I'm getting a PDF that has a little more resolution to it. Save that out. And here I can accept my defaults. If I'm using that Adobe template and I didn't remember to delete the pages, I would want to make sure that I'm using that correct range. But you can see when we go to our settings that we're making sure that everything is subset correctly and it's ready to go out. Our compression is 300, so it's a pretty high resolution PDF. And I'm going to export that. And so now it can be attached to email. Now, I did want to point out that PDFs, if you just double click on them, PDFs are going to open up either in Illustrator or in Acrobat Reader. You do not want to try to edit your resume that you created in InDesign over in Illustrator. You want to come back to InDesign and edit it. The other thing I wanted to show you is, let's say that you wanted to maybe get some feedback on your resume. In the latest version of InDesign, there's a share for review. So I can click that and let's give it a title and we hit create. And so I'm going to change my access to public. And now this link right here, it is published online. So if you ever wanted me to do like a resume critique with you, you could just share this link with me and I could come in and add pinpoints and add comments and highlight different pieces of content that I wanted to alert you to, and mock up that design. And the final way I wanted to show you is a publish online. And the cool thing about a publish online is if you go back and update any content, you can republish those changes and the link stays the same. And so then there's that publish online document. Now, typically you will be sharing a PDF, but that just gives you a couple more options for sharing out your document.